It all starts with the fact that the main count want to sell the graph for the third time. Earl Odrin asks him to sell him Michelle heroin. Only the girl's older brother, says Earl, that his sister should become a woman of Count Andre in 3 days. Therefore, a man simply cannot sell a sister. Let Odrin understand the difficulty of such decisions. But the man asks what ransom the aristocrat wants for his sister. Then the man asks 1,000 gold coins, hoping that the graph will not be able to afford it. Odrin is very upset by the husband's words. Whether the brother will be able to sell his sister to a stranger for only 1,000 gold. His brother's words were highly shocked by Michelle. For 1,000 gold, you can buy an ordinary house that a healthy brother can do this at all, only a complete fool or crazy. Earl Odrin then states that it is not necessary to keep himself, so the man is ready to pay 3 times more, so he offers 3,000 per girl. The man was shocked when he heard such a large sum for the ransom of his sister. Odin smiles because the man is not heard. The graph will really pay 3,000, only provided that the brother will not get into the personal life of the sister and the count. Even after the death of the heroine, the brother must close his eyes to everything that will happen. The man agrees to such conditions and concludes a sales agreement with the graph. At this time, Michelle sits on the couch and thinks that it was simply sold as a real slave. The heroine looks out the window and thinks that she would be better. Died earlier in the big tower? A brother approached the girl and asked that the heroine did not call her husband a brother, and Michelle could no longer use the name of the Odrin family. From the words of his brother, the heroine was very scared. Therefore, the earl pushed the man and asked to finish the conversation. The man extended his hand and asked the girl to leave the house with the count. Also, Odrin said that the heroine's brother would receive money later. Michelle extends a man's hand, but this is the third case when it is sold as a simple slave. At this time, the girl did not even think that such an offer would be able to completely change her fate. For the first time, the heroine was sold a long time ago as a child, because of her family poverty, 12 years ago at the count's house. In the past, the father of the heroine drank a lot because of the death of his wife. Only drinking gave her husband to forget about his wife. When his father was very angry, his daughter approached him and asked the man not to be very upset. But as soon as the man saw her daughter, he said that the girl does not look at him because she is very similar to her mother. The father was also very interested in gambling, so the man in the games lost everything. The money of the family, her land. He lost everything that was in his hands. To make more money at the age of 6, a man sold his daughter to a count who very much wanted a baby. Before selling his own daughter, the man asked his girl to be a good baby for a new father. The heroine wept strongly and asked her father not to sell her with an unfamiliar graph. But only the man was still on the tears of her daughter. He claimed that the girl was not as selfishly listened to her father. The heroine was crying strongly, but then a man who bought a girl came. Earl threw a bag with gold's father's father. Michelle could not believe that her life costs only a bag of gold. When the girl was leaving home, she saw her real father once. As soon as the graph who bought the heroine returned home, he was met by 2 girls who called her husband a father. Isabel and Liana asked whom their father brought. The man began to answer that he bought a new Michelle toy for his daughters. From such words, the girl was shocked. The girls were very happy about their father's gift, but the Earl asks his daughters to play very carefully with a new toy. Earl also looks at Michelle and states if the heroine brings pain or tears to the daughters of the Earl, the girl will be very sorry about her actions. There was a very terrible smile on the girls when they suggested going to play with them. The first time the heroine was bought as a toy for 2 devils. As soon as the girls went outside, they offered to play Eternal Darkness. Michelle looked at the house where she was brought and noticed that it was very much like an old warehouse. The heroine was forced to enter the Graf's daughter and said that now their new toy would live in the old warehouse. Michelle did not want to stay in the composition because it was very scary and dark, so the girl decided that she had to run. But as soon as the heroine wanted to attempt to escape, the door just closed. The girl began to shout and ask the mistress of Isabel and Liana what game they play, why the heroine should live in the old warehouse. But the housewives just laughed, because the composition is their playground for the game, so they have to like the heroine. Michelle was shocked as such girls could do so evil things, but Liana replies that they always close toys in the composition when playing. The girl is wondering why the Graf's daughters do so. But Isabel claims that they can do whatever they want with their new toys. After such words, Michelle realized that in the house of the Graf, she was not even considered. Liana and Isabel want to go back to the house, so they asked that the heroine did not leave. Mitchell posed her and asked that the girls did not go. Leave the heroine alone, because it is very dark and cold in the composition, whether the girl will freeze to death in the composition. The heroine began to shout for help, but after a few minutes, she realized that there was no one in this world that could help her. Michelle decided that she would not cry and try to survive by all possible methods. The girl gathered the grass and made a place where she could relax, not to sleep on the cold, wet earth. The heroine does not know when she comes out of the warehouse. The girl spent a very long night in her reflections about her fate and the role of a toy. Michelle woke up, but she did not understand how much time it was in the composition, because it was very dark. It was impossible to understand the night or day now. In the package, the girl noticed bread. She took it and began to look if it could be eaten. The heroine began to eat bread, but decided not to eat it, because she does not know how much time she will need to spend in this dark, cold composition. When the girl decided to sleep again, she noticed that she was thrown again, so after 2 days she was simply released from the warehouse. But the true heroine was waiting for the heroine only further. When the Graf's daughters opened the warehouse, they took away the heroine and began to lead her around the house for the girl to accept the bath. Michelle screamed that the aristocrat did not run so quickly because the girl could not move quickly after the cold. Already in the bathroom, Liana and Isabel began to mock the heroine and wash it like a dog. When the heroine asked for the girls to stop mocking, the Graf's daughters only claimed that they did not bull, but helped the girl to wash because she is too dirty. Michelle did not understand why girls are so fun to mock people. When the heroine lost consciousness, she woke up in her unknown room. The maid entered the room and began to tell that she found the heroine unconscious, so the heroine is now in the room for workers. The maid also said that the Earl allowed the use of the employee room as the girl wanted. Michelle was glad that the room finds in another house, so she will not see Liana and Isabel. When the heroine began to look at the room, she noticed clean clothes, which is why she was very happy. From that time, a new life of the heroine began. In the morning, the girl, along with the maids, gathered dirty clothes and carried it to the washing room. If in the morning, the Graf did not call the heroine for breakfast, the girl had breakfast with the maids in the basement. In the middle of the day, when the hostess studied, Michelle did the work around the house. But after Liana and Isabel, they returned to the house, took the heroine in their room, and treated it as a toy. Such games could be until late at night. The next day, the heroine had breakfast and thought that today the Graf's daughters would make with her. As soon as Michelle tasted a piece of bread, she noticed that he had a very familiar taste. After breakfast, the heroine approached the cook, and she asked this man once brought her a piece of bread to the composition. The girl thanked the cook. The man also mentioned the girl. The chef was a very kind person. Every time the heroine missed the meal, there was always a valve at the door of the room. A man always put food in a shaking, because he knew if only the heroine was noticed with an empty bowl can be punished. Michelle always thanked the cook in her thoughts. The man began to answer that on the day when the heroine was buried in the composition, it was the least that he could do. The man is also very sorry that the heroine should tolerate all the abuse of the housewives. Only the heroine smiles and claims that now the housewives do not bull even invite the girl to tea. But in his thoughts, the heroine thinks that it is better to smile, because Michelle does not want such a good man to start worrying about a girl. When the maid wanted to go to work, the cook gave her food. Such a girl was surprised and asked if the chef was confident in her actions when he gave such good food. The man began to claim that the girl is not even allowed to eat well, so the young body should be eaten well. Michelle went away and started eating. She has not felt such pleasure from food for a long time. When the heroine ate everything they brought the bowl to thank the cook, only the man says that he also has the name of the chef called Desert. Then Desri says he spends all the time in the kitchen, so the girl can come to him at any time. But if it is quite bad, a man can hide the heroine in his kitchen. Michelle does not understand why Desert helps her altogether. Then the chef replies that an adult cannot just close his eyes to the child's suffering. The girl thanks her husband and claims that she does not need help because she is treated well in the house. But in the thought of the heroine, says that in this house she cannot be helped because everyone has fun to treat the girl as a toy or pretend that the heroine does not exist at all. Desiree puts her hand on the girl's head and asks how to call our heroine. A joyful girl replies that her name Michelle. Michelle runs to work and thinks Desiree is a very good person. If the heroine is trusting the kindness of a man, she can bring a lot of problems to Cook. The heroine will not rely on the cook, but he will not forget his kindness too. When Michelle washed her clothes, she deliberately splashed the water so that no one saw her tears. Since then, 7 years have passed. The hostess says that she did not like the bow that the maid brought. Then the housewives change the other bow that likes it more. The Graf's daughters stand and admire their clothes. Then Liana says that the heroine has to go to work because she has a lot of dirty clothes that need to be cooked. Michelle apologizes to the housewives and goes to work. Now the heroine of 13 years and the daughter of Earl is 15. In 7 years of life, the girl has changed a lot. Michelle notices how the housewives sit in a carriage. The girl thinks of Liana and Isabel again, going to go to the ball. Last year, Isabel and Liana have grown up and are now busy who want to find a good man. But the global changes in 7 years are the financial condition of the Bartolome family. When the heroine was only bought by the family, flourished. But 3 years ago, the beetles attacked the fields of county, which simply destroyed the whole harvest. The money began to go from their hands, the servants were strongly cut, and many people just fired. But although the heroine did not pay the salary, but now the girl should work as a real maid. The Barthélemy Earl is very much hopeful for daughters, depending on how his daughter will marry the Barthélemy family in the future. Now, the housewives spend more time on the points, so the heroine is very pleased with this, because her horrible days began to disappear. And now, Michelle is no longer an aristocrat, but the most ordinary maid, so the girl will never have a debut. After such thoughts, a silhouette of her mother appeared behind the girl's back, asking her daughter to never give up but always believed and went forward. How difficult it was. Late in the evening, the heroine sits on the stairs of the house and waits for the hostess to return home from the ball. After a couple of minutes, Michelle hears the door loudly. As soon as the door opened, the maid welcomes his housewives, Liana and Ayabel. But the girls did not even notice the heroine. They began to quarrel because of the Duke. They could not decide whom the man looked at. Michelle noticed that the girls went to the living room. The maid had already thought to go to bed, but it was necessary to go to make tea for girls. Late in the evening, the maid made tea and prepared sweets. At the time, the housewives did not stop fighting at whom the Duke was still looking. Liana claims that she was talking to her husband on the balcony, but Isabel was sure that the Duke left his sister because he became sad. Isabel is still convinced that the Duke just started fleeing and avoiding his sister. But Liana shouts that a man at least started a conversation. But from Isabel, the Duke did not talk at all. During the quarrel, the heroine apologized. The girl thinks of some Duke deserves such attention that the sisters began to quarrel. Isabel asked the maid that the heroine is probably now interested in which Duke is talking about. Michael thought that she was really interesting, because of which her sister's husband began to quarrel. Only the girl began to mock and say that the life of the aristocracy is not for the heroine, so the maid was interesting. Liana noticed that her sister was very brutally joked. It was very painful from such words of the heroine, because she was once an aristocracy, but now she is just terribly treated. The largest star from the aristocrats of the Duke Fair, a guy only 20 years, but he already controls the duchy. Golden hair, amethyst eyes look like heaven, and royal blood flows in his veins. Last year, the previous Duke of the Fair family died, so its place was taken by Raphael, which was only 19 years old. Its popularity is in the royal family. All the girls want to gain attention. Michelle is interested in such a popular duke by this time. Lena claims that he should marry the daughter of the Marquis, but it seems that they spoke only as a child, so now the daughter of the Marquise and the Duke cold. The heroine thinks that the wedding is not for love, but the Duke is often won in the points, why the daughter of the Marquis and the Duke of the Duke. The Graf has no heir. Probably the man will take the house on himself. The other daughter should marry a man of also high status. The housewives say that it is too late, so they ask the heroine to prepare their bedroom. After cooking, the girl went to the room and went to bed. Michelle thinks that she wants to sleep as long as possible, not to see the face of Liana and Isabel. The next day, Desiree asks the girl to help him. Michelle is glad to help the man. Desiree the only person who's left to work for County, so the heroine helps him from time to time. The more often the heroine was left to work in the kitchen, the better it was to cook delicious dishes. Desiree is interested in whether the hostess has come, but if not, the heroine can have breakfast today. On the street, the girl has breakfast, and her seems to know how to make food even more delicious. But during the meal of the heroine, it seems that she heard the voice of the housewives, but too soon they would wake up. Desiree also says he heard the voice of the count, but the Graf does not often go into the house of workers. But in the box of the butterfly shouts to Michelle, immediately go to the guest room. The man is very dissatisfied that the butler's Dawn is so much screaming at the heroine, so he wants to cut a man very well. But Michelle states that she does not need to go to the guest room. The girl is very interesting why she was so suddenly summoned and so early. Michelle goes to the room and starts sorry. But only in the room the man says that they have not seen themselves for a long time. Then he calls the heroine his sister. From such events, the girl was shocked. Count at the house says that the girl's older brother wants to pick her up. The heroine does not understand anything why everything happened so suddenly. When Michelle was still a little mother, participated in her daughter's education, but the older brother of the heroine did not even notice her, as if there was no younger sister. Michelle is interested in what their father does in so many years. Only the brother replies that their father died last year, so now the older brother became the main one in the family. The brother claims that their father has made a very bad decision, but the guy wants to correct the position of the family, so he suggests that his younger sister helps her brother to correct the mistakes of the father. Then the guy says that you have to go home, because the heroine is still from the Odrin family. But from such words, the girl is very scared. The older brother says Count that if his younger sister returns to the family, she will no longer be able to work as a maid. The Earl agrees to release the heroine. Therefore, the brother asks for the girl to collect her things to return home. Michelle cannot understand why her brother takes back home. But on the other hand, the girl will never see Liana and Isabel again. Already in the Michael room, thinks that she does not even have her own clothes, only the shoes that she was once presented with a maid. But only a girl cannot just throw it away. The heroine also thinks that you need to go to the cook and thank him for everything. But Desiree was not in place. That's why the girl wrote a letter to her husband. Michelle ran very quickly because she wanted to leave the Count's house as soon as possible until no one noticed it. But Liana and Isabel still noticed how the heroine hurried to leave the house. When Michelle realized that she was noticed by the hostess, she was much frightened. But the sisters claim that they already know everything where the girl will rush, and they wish the heroine and hope that they will still meet. Michelle begins to bow and thank you for all the sisters have done for the girl. Only one of the sisters claims that they should thank the heroine. The girl does not understand what to thank the heroine. Then the hostess begins to laugh. Then Liana says if a girl leaves the house, perhaps the Bartolome family will leave the goddess of poverty, and the family will become rich again. Only the heroine does not understand what the goddess of poverty the sisters speak. Liana and Isabel laugh. They hope that when the girl leaves their home, the goddess of poverty will really disappear. Also, the housewives begin to make fun of the clothes that the girl took with them. The sisters are even glad that the stinking goddess of poverty leaves their house. The heroine was very painful to hear it all, but the girl just said goodbye to her sisters. The upset Michelle was in a hurry to leave the house very quickly, because today, the last day when the heroine will listen to ridicule. When Michelle came to the room to her brother and Count, she noticed about 400 gold coins on the table. The older brother did not want to stay in the house, so he also went very quickly. After the coins, the heroine realized that she was not just taken away, she was bought again, so the sisters were very happy because of it. As soon as Michelle came to the carriage, she was surprised because there was never much money and luxurious carriages in their family. Already in the carriage, the girl tried to talk to her brother. Only the guy asks that his sister does not open his mouth when she is not asked. Michelle was very upset from this answer. Because her fate has not changed, she will never be happy. After a couple of hours, the heroine returned home again to Odran. The maid noticed as the guy came with a new girl and asks the Graf. Only as a Graf climbed out of a carriage, he immediately asked a butterfly where Natalie is now, to which the nobleman replies that in the room for guests. Michelle is surprised by the appearance of the house. He has changed greatly since his father sold it. The brother ordered his sister to go with him to the guest room. In the room, the Graf is very warm. Natalie, The countess looked very coldly at the heroine and asked her husband what a girl was. The man began to claim that Michelle was his younger sister. The older brother also introduced his sister to his wife. The girl worshipped, and the council to meet. But from such a greeting, the countess was just laughing, and she noticed that the heroine could not even be able to call correctly. Michelle began to apologize for her manners. After his wife's words, his brother also began to shout at his sister, because she should learn from the count's family beautiful manners. Therefore, tomorrow, the girl will begin the lessons of the right manners for the graph. Let the younger sister try and study well. The guy also says that the housewife is his wife Natalie, so let the heroine listen to a new mistress. As soon as Michelle came into the house, she immediately realized that no one was happy to see her here. The Audrin family is no longer like a heroine house. The girl approached the girl and held the heroine to her room. When Michelle came into her room, immediately remembered the mother and how they once spent time together. But only in this house there is no more beautiful and warm memories. A maid also entered the heroine. Her name is Emma. Now the woman will be a personal maid of the heroine. Michelle asks the maid why at all her older brother ordered the heroine to be given a personal maid. Emma claims that she once worked on the past farmer at home, but the new owner Natalie, the woman did not like that. The maid was all the time sweet dishes. The maid was asked to help the girl study the house, so they were ordered to be a personal maid. Michelle looks at the woman and thinks that although she and the maid behavior in her aristocrat, so the heroine asks her Emma once was an aristocrat. The woman replies that she is the fourth daughter of Baron Cousteau. When Cousteau's children are made adults, they must provide themselves. The heroine cannot believe why the woman chose to work as a maid. Only Emma claims that she is the fourth daughter, so no one will take her from his wife. She can also manage her family's house. As soon as the Natalie mistress appeared in the house, the maid was very upset that she was down. But when the woman was heard that she would be a personal maid, this news again gave Emma hope for the best. Michelle looks at the behavior of the maid and the manners of the woman, and does not understand why such a good maid was reduced to washing dishes. The girl also complains to the woman that she offended the mistress of Natalie. Only Emma claims that this is not the case, just their new hostess and the fox. Emma tells why she was lowered. From the first appearance, the hostess said that the maid was not more beautiful than the mistress, so the woman was lowered and sent to the kitchen. The maid also states that their mistress and good on the face may be possible, but not for the character. Emma will prepare a bathroom for the girl and good clothes. But for starting, the maid wants to ask what will eat the heroine for dinner. When a woman asked about other heroine clothes, Michelle replied that the form of a maid was her only clothing. From this answer, the maid was very angry who at all allowed to deal with the countess. Emma came to the door of the room, but the girl asked what a woman was thinking at all. Then the angry maid states that she will now be sorry for the graph. As soon as the girl heard that the maid will now go to the brother, the heroine stopped the woman immediately. But Emma is sure that the countess does not have to go in the house in the clothes of the maid. A couple of minutes later, a nobleman came to the heroine, and with him the maids brought his clothes. The maids just threw clothes on the ground. Emma asked that the workers were doing, to which the Bogretsky replied that it was all gifts of the hostess. Michelle takes the dress and notices that it is all dirty and in spots. The girl looks at all her clothes and realizes that his clothes are torn and the shoes are broken. But the heroine is sure if you repair clothes and shoes, tomorrow she will be able to meet her personal teacher. Michelle also thinks that Natalie was very generous to give such beautiful clothes. But only a maid of a different thought. The mistress simply gave the heroine a lot of musora, who just needs to be thrown away. And the size of the clothing is not suitable for the heroine. Only the girl is very pleased to even such dirty clothes. Michelle also thanks the maid that she is concerned about the heroine, but the girl asks for a woman to complain to anyone at Michelle. Emma is surprised by the words of the heroine. At this time, Michelle holds a dirty dress and remembers a conversation with his brother, in a carriage, who ordered his sister not to open his mouth without order. The girl does not want something to happen to her personal maid. The heroine is convinced that with Emma's support, the girl will be able to survive very difficult times, as it used to be with Kukar Desiree. Therefore, you do not have to make problems, either a brother or a mistress Natalie. Michelle smiles and claims that she needs to dress before dinner. Emma begins to look for beautiful, clean clothes for the girl, so she asks for the countess to wait. Michelle was glad that the maid is so worried about the girl, so she will also look for her clothes. But the woman asked for a better heroine to find a beautiful shoe. When the girl found Emma's shoes, noticed that they had a broken heel. Then the heroine takes and breaks another heel on other shoes. In the look of the girl, walking without heels is very convenient. Also, the heroine simply cannot walk on heels. Emma also came up with one wonderful idea on the account of clothing. The maid took 3 dresses and made one beautiful. Michelle really liked the clothes that the maid made. Now the woman says that there is only good makeup left, and you can go for dinner. Michelle is surprised that her room has cosmetics, but then remembers that the older brother wants to make a good graph from her sister. Emma claims that the girl is very beautiful because she is the daughter of Count Audrin, but only the heroine remembers that she was a toy. Then free labor. No one ever considered the girl a graph. When the maid finished wearing the heroine, the girl looked like a real count. The woman is sure that everyone will like the girl's clothes. Then Michelle said in a confident voice that they could go for dinner. On the way to the dinner room, Natalie noticed the heroine. The hostess was just shocked by the girl's appearance. Natalie thinks that she gave just a lot of mossor, while Michelle was able to make good clothes from it. The hostess was very angry, so she said that the earl's sister wears very simple clothes. It is better for them to go for dinner so as not to see it. The maid was very happy when she saw the reaction of the hostess. They were surprised by the Natalie beauty of the heroine. But only the girl is very concerned about the reaction of the hostess. On her face could be seen as they were very angry. Already at the table, his brother is interested in his sister knows the basics of table etiquette. Michelle replies that Liana and Isabel's mistress has taught the girl the basics. It happened in one day when the hostess wanted to have lunch with the girl. On that day, Liana and Isabel mocked the heroine that she could not even behave at the table. The hostess calculated that it would be a lot of fun to teach the heroine of table etiquette. But the teaching grew again in the abuse of the heroine. The girl learned the basics, but then he was strongly regretted. Alan claims that the sister has to eat more because she is too thin and hair like straw. Natalie begins to mock the heroine and says the appearance of Michelle can disgrace the Audrin family. The girl agrees with the words, but thinks that such words and in comparison do not go with the actions of Liana and Isabel. Michelle returned to her room and thinks that life in the house was much harder. The girl very much wants to dress in her ordinary clothes. The next day, the heroine thinks that the teacher had to come for a long time, but why he is delayed. Emma says that very strange, because the teacher had to come for a long time. But after a couple of minutes, a woman comes into the room. From today, she will be a personal teacher of the heroine. The teacher's name, Janet. Janet is interested in how the heroine feels, but the girl does not understand what the question is. The teacher says that the earl told the woman that the girl is poor in health, which is why the girl did not get a good study in her childhood. Michelle understands why her brother told about poor health, because he could not tell the true reason why the girl did not receive education. The heroine replies that she feels good now. Then Janet states, as soon as Michelle becomes bad, the girl can say it and they will stop her studies. A joyful teacher says that she will try to teach the heroine to her debut. The girl is very pleased to hear the words of the teacher, but the heroine thinks that her brother wants her sister to make his debut in the high world. From this day, Janet will begin to teach the heroine the basics of reading and writing. Janet says that in the reading time, let the girl look for words in the vocabulary that does not know. Also, the teacher says that there are no mistakes in the reading, but the heroine needs to expand her vocabulary. Also, while reading, you should record in a notebook that the heroine read in her own words. In the book that the teacher gave 10 small stories. Let the countess read them in 4 days. When the lesson was completed, the heroine thanked the woman for her good study. Once upon a time, Michelle was not even able to touch the book, so she didn't even know that it would be so interesting to read. Emma says the heroine that the bathroom is ready to take a break from study. The maid also says that she understands that the heroine is being prepared for her debut, and tomorrow she will study all day. But do not forget about vacation. The heroine agrees that it is impossible to study forever. Every day new teachers came to the girl. As soon as Michelle studied many kingdoms, she was shocked. After a couple of months of study, the maid talks to the teacher and claims that the heroine loves to learn very much. Janet is sure that this is all because the girl teaches everything very quickly. But only Emma is concerned about her county, because she does not even relax. Michelle learns for 15 hours a day. The experience of the maid was confirmed. Despite the desire of the heroine to study, the girl's health was not used to such changes. Late dinner, when the heroine wanted to sleep hard, she just couldn't because she had many tasks that had to be done. Also late at night, the hostess came to the countess's room. Natalie was very angry. Why the girl here will come tomorrow, teachers should finish all the tasks. Michelle listens to the hostess screams, but thinks that her head is very sore. Natalie asks that the heroine starts to apologize. Even if the girl is younger sister of Count Alana, it is still necessary to study well, as people from the house try to go through a lot of money for teachers, as the heroine in general should thank her brother and his wife. Michelle began to apologize. Only the hostess began to shout to lift her head when they talked to her. As soon as the girl raised her head, she struck Natalie. The mistress shouts that the heroine is not alarming, so if the girl does not obey Natalie, she will very much regret it. The next day, the maid noticed strong injuries on the heroine's face. Michelle corresponds to the maid that she was just reading nothing wrong. Emma suggested bringing water to the heroine. The Graf looks in the mirror and notices a very large bruise. Probably the blow of the hostess was heavy because of the rings in her hands. The girl thinks that because of such a great bruise now, she understands why the maid started to worry so much, so the heroine apologizes to Emma. As soon as the heroine apologized to the maid, she immediately sat for her studies. The woman was indignant. Whether the girl can continue to learn with such beatings. Michelle apologizes, but the maid understands the girl. But let the countess at least give the wound, and then let him sit for her studies. Emma asks for such very beatings from the hostess Natalie, if it is necessary to tell the Graf urgently. But the heroine asks that the maid does not tell anything the Graf. The girl thinks that still her brother will do nothing, so the hostess will only be more mocked over the heroine. So 3 years have passed. Now the heroine of 16, Michelle could count the younger sister of the Count. Because she received a good education and improved the appearance, the Countess was ready for debut. It remains 1 day before the debut. The maid happily reports that a new dress for the Countess has come. Emma notices that the heroine is a little upset, so he suggests a snack. The maid gives the candy a woman bought in the city. When the heroine ties, she is pleasantly surprised by the taste. Emma often brought sweets that she bought in the city of Countess. The girl tasted sweets, drank tea, and just talked with a maid. The heroine appreciated such moments more in the world. The woman notices that the day before the debut, the girl is very upset. Then the heroine says that her brother plans to sell to her sister to some master for a large sum of money. Only because of this, the Count bought teachers all the time. Even the brother bought a dress thanks to that moment. Only Emma states that it is possible that the heroine should look at it from a good look, because the girl should find a good man who will take the heroine from such a brutal house. You need to find some very important Graf, or even the Duke, and then the Graf will be free. Michelle does not believe that this is possible. Only Emma claims that the Earl cannot see a lot of other important cases at his younger sister. Also, Natalie's mistress probably does not want the heroine to stay in the house, so this is a very good chance for the heroine to change her life. Michelle thinks that in the last time the hostess began to avoid heroine frequently. The girl is convinced that because she is making a more beautiful hostess every year, just does not want the heroine to stay in their home. The Countess also states that tomorrow will be her only chance to change soy life. Only the maid does not understand why the only one. Then the heroine reports if you think as her brother, the highest price for a girl will be on her debut day, so then the price will only fall. Michelle asks tomorrow the maid makes the heroine the most beautiful at the ball. Emma replies that the Countess can rely on a woman because the maid also wants the girl to get freedom. There are so many places that Emma wants to go with the heroine. Debut day Royal Castle. In the right side there are people who made their debut today. Therefore, the older brother shows that the Countess goes on the left side of the hall. The heroine looks at the aristocrats and thinks that everyone knows everyone here, because everyone talks well. Michelle recalls how Emma said that, after the first dance, let the girl walk near the wall and look for royal places, because in such places are dukes or grafs from successful families. Michelle thinks that she has to listen to her maid, in this case should go out. When she came to the heroine to introduce himself between the dukes, grafs, and aristocrats, the girl began to worry very much. Then Michelle Audran is released on the balcony. All dukes and grafs were simply shocked by the beauty of the heroine. After the presentation, Her sister approached her brother for his first dance. The first dance should be danced with a relative. The heroine is very afraid to dance with her brother, but she has no choice. During the dance, the brother says that the sister was not worried. The younger sister of Earl Allen simply transferred all the attention of people. No one saw the girl before. This is the first time when she came to the ball among the aristocrats. Natalie also asks to dance, but the Earl states that he simply cannot leave his sister alone. Such words have been very angry with the Graf. Only the heroine says that she can wait for the older brother to go to dance with her wife. As soon as the brother goes to dance, he orders his sister not to make nonsense. Earl Allen went to dance. At this time, the heroine looked where the royal seats were told by the maid. Michelle noticed places, but it will be difficult to get to them because there are many Grafs. When the girl approached the royal places, she noticed the Duke. The girl first saw the Duke. She didn't even think that a man could be so good. The Countess thought that she was not good enough for the Duke fair, so she quickly escaped from the Duke. At this time, the girl noticed the Count and suggested that he dance with him. The girl was very glad that she was offered a dance, so the heroine agreed to dance with a stranger. But when Michelle agreed, many men came to her. They all began to be offered to dance with them. When the girl began to flee from the Counts, she heard a very familiar voice. Among all guests, the heroine was noticed by Liana and Isabel. The sisters began to greet the heroine on her debut and claimed that she became very good. The Countess was also offered a girl to drink, but she refused. Therefore, Liana began to mock the heroine because the real Countess is able to enjoy wine. Only when Michelle wanted to take a glass in the wine did the Countess pull the heroine by the hand to throw, but the girl stayed on her feet. When Michelle looked at Isabel, she noticed that the Countess was all in wine. Her sister began to shout what it was because of the heroine. The Countess became scared of the consequences that can happen through a scandal. When people heard the screams of Liana, they all looked at the sisters to understand what happened. Isabel started screaming. Did the girl do so because the sisters helped the country Audran? Although the girls called Michelle the heroine of poverty, their father still loved the girl. So now the county of the heroine swims in money, while the family of Liana and Isabel simply survive without money. But it does not give the girl the right to mock her sisters. Michelle wanted to say everything that she had not been bullied by her sisters. Only people began to say that everyone saw how the heroine spilled wine on the dress of Bartholomew's daughter. The girl looked at the sister's face and realized that they had put a heroine. Liana began to cry and say that all the people around the heroine were bullied, but only the sisters treated the girl well. So probably the girls were mistaken when they treated the heroine well, because the girl still spilled wine on a dress even after their friendship. But according to all the good words of the sisters, the very cruel truth was hiding. Probably through Michelle Berthelemy House, began to suffer from poverty. But let the heroine forgive the sister if they somehow offended her. From the words of the Graf, all people began to talk about the heroine, to call her the goddess of poverty and a very cruel count. When the older brother looked at the heroine, he was very disappointed. After the sisters finished mocking the girl, they hurried to leave the banquet. Michelle fell to her knees and did not know what to do next. Count Allen began shouting that they immediately returned home. The heroine began to ask her brother to change his mind, but the count was still at the request of his sister because he firmly decided to return. The aristocrats who gathered on the banquet began to say that the heroine was not at all other than Audran's family. Probably still on the girl is the curse of the goddess of poverty. If other people will deal with the girl, their house will sink in poverty. When the heroine went from the banquet, the Duke looked at her silently. Michelle sits in a carriage. She does not understand why everything was so tried for the sake of today. The heroine recalls how she and the maid were very prepared for her debut and preparing a good future. Only all the girl was hoping for, just destroyed in a couple of minutes. At this time, sisters are sitting on the balcony and discussing that they have long been not bullied. It is a very pleasant feeling, Liana agrees with her sister, because playing with Michelle is a lot of fun. Girls laugh because of this situation, the reputation will be restored. The sisters hope that their girlfriend will live the end of life in poverty, because such is the fate in the heroine. When the heroine returned home, she was met by a joyful Emma. She was surprised that the girl returned so early from her own debut. The maid noticed that the girl is very upset, so that the woman was curious about something bad at the ball. When Michelle told everything, the maid was just in the spring, As the two countess could belies the heroine during her debut, the maid was convinced that the sisters were bullied by other Graffs. After the bullying, the girl is sure that she will not get married well now. The girl is pleased that the maid supports her, but in a couple of minutes the sister will come. He will be very angry, so it will be better if the maid leaves the heroine room. When Emma refused to leave the room, the girl thinks that if her brother gets angry and raises her hand at the heroine, the maid will try to protect the girl. Michelle does not want to bring the problem of the maid. A strongly upset maid agreed to leave the room. A couple of minutes later, a brother knocked into the room and asked for the heroine to appear immediately in the guest room. Michelle is very scared to go there, but she has no other choice. As soon as the heroine went into the room, the older brother immediately began to shout at the sister. She does not understand what she did on such an important banquet. Does Michelle not even guess why her brother took home and spent so much money? But because of the situation, the whole plan of the count was failed. Alan shouts that the heroine is similar to her parents. No one in the family Ordan has a mind. Let the sister no longer fall on the eye of a brother. Michael begins to cry. She does not understand why it is all happening with her, because the girl did not do anything wrong in her life. Is her fate to live in pain and hatred? But the heroine does not lose hope. She does not want to bring Emmy problems, so she needs to be gathered with forces. Perhaps in the future she can be happy in the future. The heroine spent the next week in her own room. Since the maid saw the bruising and body of the girl, the woman began to take care of the heroine more than usual. Thanks to Emma's experiences, the girl was doing more and more every day. The heroine felt that at least one person in the world loves her. Suddenly, a butter comes into the room and reports that Michelle will soon come a guest, so let the girl be ready to go into the room for guests. Emma is surprised by a sudden message, so he asks what a guest at all, but the heroine also understands anything. The maid states if the guest came to the heroine, let her take a woman with her to a meeting. Emma really wants to look at the girl's gist, so she promises that she will not interfere. Michel agrees to go to a meeting with his personal maid. The heroine enters the room and immediately apologizes to her brother. Count Alan introduces his sister to her husband and says that in the future, a stranger will take care of his sister. As soon as Michelle looked at her husband, she realized that she probably did not deserve happiness. The brother introduces his sister to Earl Ander. Earl asked once in Alan's hands and hearts. The heroine welcomes her husband, and Alan asks her sister to sit next to the count. As soon as the girl sat next to the count, Ander immediately took the heroine by the hand, from which the countess was not delighted. The man asked if the count liked his younger sister. Earl Ander claims that he immediately noticed the beauty of the heroine in her debut. Earl is convinced that the girl will be a very beautiful wife, but the heroine from such words began to only be more afraid of Count Ander. Alan is very glad that the Earl was satisfied. Ander says they will meet in the next Saturday. By this time the Graf will prepare the whole amount of money you need. Emma was just shocked when she saw the future husband of the heroine. The sister asks her brother that she knows nothing about the Graf, how she can become a wife for a stranger at all. But Count Alan replies that the man will take the girl next Saturday. The wedding will not be, because the heroine will be the fifth bride. Emma asks the countess to go to her room sooner. Already in the room, a woman says that you need to run as soon as possible, because the countess should not marry such a Graf. Michelle is interested in a servant of something knows something. Then the woman says that Earl Ander is very bad to speak all the aristocrats. The Graf also loves young women very rich, so the man will be married 4 times. The 2 past wives of the Earl died. Also the virgins just disappeared. Andre, every time he was left by his wife, was severely fed. But on the bodies of dead women, they always found many strange injuries. As everyone learned that the Earl actually was a murderer, and many times the man was stuck his mouth with his money, so he was never punished this time. Therefore, no matter how much the Earl Ander paid, the maid simply cannot give his countess in the hands of the killer. From the story of the maid, the heroine wept. She became very scary, because with such a Graf could not be any happiness. The older brother was even ready to sell her sister to such a terrible man. The maid asks that the girl in no way agrees to marry such a cruel person. Michelle asks that a woman does not cry in them. A week ago, the girls will come up with how to escape from the house. Emma proposes to rent an apartment in the city to her name so that they can hide in the city. The girl also thinks that it will be easier in the city. Also, a woman will try to get ordinary city clothes for the girl. When girls make a lot of money, they need to flee to the kingdom of Belinda, because there are many foreigners in such a kingdom. From the day of acquaintance with the Count, the heroine and the maid began to study the house to escape, and found the opportunity for the girl to escape. The back door for the servants when the Graf of Allen returns home. All the servants go out to meet the man during the change of security. Everyone goes to the kitchen to receive food. It is better to choose the moment when the Natali hostess will not be home. In a couple of days, the moment is when you can escape from the house. Michelle is waiting for the maid a day. The heroine was said that there were no guards, but she could not check it, so it would be possible to believe the words. As soon as the heroine touched the door, she realized that the door was closed. Whether her brother knew that her sister would try to plan an escape from the house, the girl started knocking on the door and calling the maid for help to open the door. The heroine thinks if her brother knew about escape, he would probably be bullied on the maid. So the girl began to try to knock the door to help the woman. When Michelle knocked the door, they hit the head heavily, from which she lost consciousness, but she was poured into her face. As soon as the girl woke up, she immediately noticed her brother. The heroine began to ask her brother about her personal maid. Only Alan replies that the maid is not in the house now, because the woman wanted to steal the countess. For such an act, she was punished. Emma was taken to a deep, dark forest where there are a lot of monsters. From such news, Michelle began to shout that the maid of Baron's daughter is her brother, thinks that he would just get off his hands. Only the brother asks that the sister does not forget that Alan is higher in status than a baron, so the Graf is not threatening. Earl Alan leaves the room and says the sister, from that time, the wife of Count Ander, so until the husband comes after the girl, she should not leave her room. The heroine recalls how her teacher told that there are a lot of monsters in the forest, but if someone needs to move through the forest, you need to hire the best guards. Michelle is sure that the maid will not come out of such a place alive. The girl thinks if she immediately listened to her brother and married Count Ander, the maid would be alive. The heroine is trying to leave the house and find a maid. Michelle jumps from a great height to save a woman. The girl goes around the city and thinks that after work of the maid, Emma could become a pastry chef, fall in love with her husband, create a good family, and live happily. At the end of the city, Michelle sees the road to the forest. But even if she acts to the forest that a weak girl can do, probably even too late to save the maid, at such moments, the heroine thinks that it would be better if she would not be born. Far in the sky, the girl noticed a tall tower. The heroine rose to a high tower and began to cry. Because without a maid, the girl would not be happy. Emma was the only one who gave the girl the strength to live on. On the edge of the tower, the heroine is convinced that now her brother is not disappointed, so the girl decided to go to the trace for a maid. Michelle jumped. She believes that when she saw a woman, the girl will probably have to apologize for a long time, but she is ready. But only before the heroine began to fall, the Duke of Fair saved her. Fair did not understand what the heroine is doing, as easy as possible to say goodbye to her own life. From the screams of the Duke, Michelle thought that a man would be beaten now. Only when Fair noticed that the girl was preparing for a blow, the man replied that he would never dare to afford to raise his hand at the girl. Michelle began to apologize that she brought many problems to the Duke and began to release her. Only the man began to claim that he could not just let the girl let go. If he did it, the heroine again made a suicide attempt. The man was also surprised that the girl knew the Duke in the face. Fair sat near the heroine and asked to tell what the situation happened that the girl went to suicide. Also, a man thinks that the meeting could not happen by accident. The Duke can help. The heroine does not want to tell the situation because it can spoil the mood, but the man began to ask him to tell everything because the Duke does not know everything, so he will not be able to help. Fair also began to say that if a girl does not want to tell, it will be necessary to return her home. Then the heroine remembered her brother if she returns home to her end. Michelle told the Duke and asked the Fair to tell anyone that he saw a girl on the tower, at least in memory of a girl's maid. Only a man cannot just let go of the heroine. Is the girl think that the maid would like that her mistress just wants to die? The heroine shouts that so the woman would not like it, but how she can continue to live further if Emma died then, and the girl does not make no more sense to live on. Then the Duke states if the girl does not see the point of living on, let her trust her life. If Michelle thinks she can't live a happy life, then a man can prove the other side of life. Only the heroine says that the person was more expensive. There is no more expensive and leave in this world. The man asks what a maid for the girl wanted. Then Michelle remembered that Emma always wanted the heroine to be happy. After the memories of Emma, the heroine wept and hugged the Duke. The man and the heroine went down to the carriage. The Duke states that the girl should be changed. Because her clothes are all the socation, Fair does not want such a beautiful girl to get sick suddenly. Then Michelle recalls that Count Alan poured a girl with cold water when she wanted to escape from the house. The heroine began to blush, because for the first time in her life, she hears the words from a person who cares about her. When the carriage began to move, the Countess was upset that she was sent home again. Michelle thinks how her brother will react when she sees her sister again at home, because the heroine still trusted the stranger. Already in the house, Audran. The Duke welcomes the butter. The man says that Fair arrived very suddenly, so the butter will immediately call the owner of the house. The man is also surprised when, together with the Duke, notices the Graf. Fair asks for the Bogretsky to take them to the room to wait for the owner. The Duke came to the Duke. He wanted to find out why Fair came to his house so suddenly. Then, when his older brother noticed his sister, he was shocked at the Duke. Fair apologizes that he arrived at the Earl's house so suddenly. Just the Duke wanted to offer one favorable Alan. The Earl does not understand what the condition at all is talking now. Then the man asks for Count Alan to give his sister to the Duke. Only a Graf cannot, because his sister will become the wife of Count André in 3 days. Although the man and the Count cannot so simply give his dear price to his sister. Then the man looks at the Count and asks how much to pay the money to take away his heroine. Alan replies that 3,000 gold coins are less than his sister is not worth it. At this time, the girl thinks that her brother asked for a very big sum of money, but why the Duke just smiles now? Only to the price of the Count, man replied that for such a beautiful girl, he was ready to pay 3 times more expensive, as much as 9,000 gold. From that amount of Alan was shocked. But a man has conditions if the Duke buys the sister of the Earl. The brother should in no case go into the girl's life even after her death. Such words were very frightened by the heroine. Only Fair also says Alan forget that he had once had a sister. Let her think that he sold a girl like a slave. After such words, Michelle realized that her brother, that the Duke was very similar to people. It would be better to die when she wanted to jump from the tower. When the Earl listened to all the conditions, he agrees to sell his sister and forget about its existence. The man was going to go to the castle and also takes the heroine with him, so the Count will receive money later. The girl approaches the girl and says that she forgets that she had once her brother. Also, the heroine can no longer use the families of Audran's house. Michel leaves the house and sits in a carriage with the Duke, at which time a carriage was sitting in a carriage Demian. The assistant says that the man has tried well, and Demian claims that the Marquis Leslie wanted to meet the Duke. Only Fair asks for the assistant to take care of Michelle. Demian welcomes the heroine and says he is an assistant and also a personal security officer of the Duke. The man, along with the heroine, came to the castle of the Marquise Leslie. Already in the castle of the Marquis, the man apologizes to the Duke for the bad deeds of her daughter. The woman also apologizes and thanks that Fair has found time to come. Only his luminosity asks for the parents of the girl Clarice to raise her head. But the man is sorry because the wedding of the Duke would happen in 3 days. But her husband's daughter suddenly fled. Therefore, the Duke came to the Marquis with a very important request. The guy wants Lily to assume the heroine. The man is surprised when he saw a girl. Fair introduces Michelle. She is a younger sister of Count Audran, and also recently the heroine's brother tore with her all family relationships. Leslie remembers that the girl only recently made her debut. The heroine remembers the situation that has happened on the debut, so she cannot look into her husband's eyes. Only Fair claims that the goddess of poverty is just a slander. In fact, Michelle is a beautiful girl. So if the Marquise is prevailing the heroine, they can make a wedding in 3 days. Only a wife will become Michelle and not Clarice. A man is interested in not a girl after such a Duke, and that the guy confirms the words of the Marquise. But Leslie hesitates the heroine. Only a woman says they will gladly take such a beautiful girl in her family. The heroine does not know what happens here. The Marquis is also surprised by the Duke did not explain anything to the girl. Only the guy promises to make everyone a little later. Then Fair takes the heroine by the hand and asks whether the girl agrees to become the Duke's wife. Michelle in shock from such a proposal. Only the Duke says that he had to marry Clarice, only that was all the wedding under the treaty. But as the girl heard, Clarice escaped 3 days before the wedding, along with his beloved butterfly. The guy does not keep his evil on the girl, and the Duke will not look and return Clarice home forcibly. But it is necessary to solve the situation that rolled through the escape. The Marquis family is very famous. If everyone learns that the real daughter of the Marquis has run away with another person before the wedding, it can cause a very big scandal. So as soon as the guy met the heroine, he realized that it was a fate, so the girl and the Duke can help each other. Only the heroine is afraid to take on such a great responsibility. The Duke is convinced that Michelle would turn out in Michelle because her debut was very good. And especially on the tower, when the heroine talked to Fair, he fell to make the girl happy. Michelle looks into the Duke's eyes and thinks that in his eyes, you can see the sadness, whether the wedding for the Duke is considered something more than just a political agreement. After a couple of minutes of silence, the heroine still agrees to become the Duke's wife. From such a Marquise is very happy, so the husband will immediately prepare all the documents. The woman says that very soon Michelle will become part of the Duke of Fair. But by that time, the Marquise will be very happy to see a girl in her home. Michelle thanks the Marquise for their kind words, but the girl cannot trust the words because of everything she had to go through. The Duke noticed that the heroine was very worried, so he easily put her hand on her back. The girl thinks that Fair was a stranger, but from the fact that he laid his hand became calmer. Leslie says that probably in Michelle was a very difficult day, so let the girl take the bath and go to rest. The man is also interested when the Duke will take his future wife to the duchy, which the guy reports tomorrow. In this case, the man will be very pleased to live today as a real family. The heroine thanks very much, thanks to the warm words of the Marquise. In Michelle, she thinks that she has left her brother's house, from that time she can be free. The heroine also remembers the maid and asks for all forgiveness. She also thinks if there would be Emma, she would be very pleased with today's news. After the memories of Michelle, a maid appears. She says that the girl does not cry, because she turned out to become happy, so the woman is very glad for the heroine. Only this was all the girl's idea. In the carriage, the Duke asks whether the assistant made the guy order. Damian reports that they have prepared 3,000 gold coins to pay a Graf of Allen, also prepared a room for the future wife. Fair also asks a girl who was in the forest about Emma's maid. The guard states that the searches are going, but there are no good results yet. Then the Duke thinks that we need to ask for help in His Majesty to increase the searches. Still, the guy had to go to the royal castle. It is necessary to summarize the whole situation about Michelle so that there are no unpleasant situations, and if the Duke honestly admitted Clarice, such problems could be avoided. Fair is sure that the king wants to learn all the details, although the heroine was a very horrible story, but so it will be possible to correct such a difficult situation. Damian claims that Lady Michelle is not the most bad choice for the Duke. The assistant has already prepared all the documents that he could get about the girl. When the Duke reads, he thinks that the heroine told him everything written in the documents. The guy counts that reading the whole situation of the heroine in Boumaz is very painful. Fair says that the assistant passes all the documents about the life of the heroine of the Marquise. Also, let Damian check all the finances of Count Audrin. The guard is interested in the Duke, think that Michelle's brother can receive money with dirty methods. Only Fair states that he was not a failed debut. Agree to the contract with the Count André. Especially for a small amount of money, it is very strange. Once in the past, the Audrin family was very poor. Only today's owner was able to raise the family from the knees of finances, at the expense of personal business. All gorgeous items in the Graf's house are just fakes. Why decorate the house with counterfeits if the Graf does not spend money on himself, and the financial condition of the family is good? Then why the Count is so much money for his own younger sister? Therefore, the Graf wants to find answers to all his questions. The assistant understood the guy's opinion, so will start considering the Audrin family.